Mike, are we going to discuss anything else, or is
Yeah,
this
I think
is this
that's
a
it. It looks
meeting?
like people are joining. Thank you so much, guys. Yeah, we're just gonna get started here in a few minutes. Yeah. Well, it's 10 a.m., but we're gonna probably wait another couple minutes just to let people join. Thank you, everyone who's already logged on. Yeah, just give us a few more minutes here. Well, Suzanne, do you think we should go ahead and get started?
Sure.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Hope everyone enjoyed the long weekend. Today is the latest in our monthly webinar series on MediLedger. Today we're doing a deep dive into the challenge of managing customers in the pharmaceutical industry and evaluating contract eligibility for all of them. Suzanne Somerville, Chronicled CEO, will again be taking the lead today. And I'm excited to share she'll be joined by Abhishek Gutgutia, Chief Product Officer here at Chronicled. So together, the two of them will go ahead and take the lead. My name is Mike Hill, Head of Marketing. I'll be moderating. You can ping me in the chat if you have any administrative issues, concerns during the talk. And we start just a couple admin points. All participants should have been muted for the sake of the group, but we do highly encourage questions throughout. So please use the Q&A tool at the bottom of Zoom. If you have any questions, post it there, and we'll be sure to answer those either during the talk when you ask them, or at the very least at the end during the Q&A session. But we'll make sure to address all questions. But we do encourage it to be interactive, so please feel free to speak up. And with that, I'll hand it over to Suzanne.
Thank you so much, Mike, and thank you everyone for joining us today. As Mike said, I'm excited that I'll be joined today by Abhi, our Chief Product Officer, who's going to help go through a lot of the information we want to cover today. I'm going to start by giving us an overview on the chargeback solution. For some of you who've attended our other webinars, this might be a little bit of repeat, but I think it'll be valuable to provide an overview, obviously, for the new folks and as a refresher for you as well. We're then going to walk through the ways that we see MediLedger and the construction of this solution being able to improve the ability to manage customers and eligibility. We're going to talk about the synchronized industry data. We'll talk about customer evaluation and the engine that has been built to really improve that functionality, and then talk about customer identity alignment. At the end, we're going to cover where does the solution go from here, and what else is in store for MediLedger and the MediLedger network. So I wanted to start again with a little bit of refresh on MediLedger and what our vision is and where we're going and how the solution has been designed to work. To start with, we believe with the use of blockchain technology that it's now possible to create a real-time industry-wide network that can automate the business that companies do with each other. So topics like, is the product authentic? Was my rebate correct? All of this can now be automated and enable companies to do these transactions peer-to-peer without a third party sitting in between. The network is comprised of a two-layer architecture. The first is the blockchain network, designated here in the diagram by the red circles. All companies are onboarded into this network. It's a permission network, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in terms of the information. And with everyone onboarded, they have connectivity to a blockchain interface that allows them to post data or transactions that are then shared with everyone else in the network, assuming consensus is met and the rules are all agreed. The rules are all met for the transactions that are posted. So everything that's posted to that red network gets shared with everyone immediately. But by putting the company's identities on the network, we're also able to enable a peer-to-peer interface. That's the blue line in this network. And that allows companies to send private peer-to-peer messages between any other company that's in the network. No one else can see those transactions. No one else can see that data. No one else can even tell that that message or transaction took place. It's entirely confidential. And so this two-layer network is critical as we're designing solutions to ensure what stays private, and what is beneficial to be public, either because everyone in the network participates or it enables proof of transactions that can be used later to validate that data is accurate between the parties that are involved in that transaction. And it's this two-layer network that is the core of the design of the work and solutions that go into the MediLedger network. So I wanted to talk through our contract and chargeback solution again to remind everyone how, with this two-layer network, it's been designed to work and really improve the contract and chargeback processes. So first, we have and are working on interfaces to common public data that enables everyone to be accessing the same information at the same time. It enables real-time updates. So we're already working with HIBIC, who will be hosting a node in the network in connectivity to DEA and HRSA databases to ensure that everyone's operating from the same data. In step two, by now being connected in a real-time peer-to-peer network, companies can send each other updates, as in this case, if a GPO has updated customers, they can send that information to manufacturers and distributors real time. One of the benefits also in the network is that we can enable rule enforcement so that all the data that is being sent from a GPO actually is validated ahead of time. Something maybe as simple as is a DEA number accurate and active at this moment in time can be checked against that GPO roster such that if it's not, that information is not pushed, it's kept at the GPO's door, and the GPO is notified that their data is not accurate, and there's work for them to do to fix it before it's sent to the others in the network. This idea of rule enforcement prior to sending information ensures that everyone is doing their job in making sure their data is accurate and that you are getting clean and accurate data for your transactions to work accurately. So these GPO roster updates can be pushed real time so that all parties are aware as GPO membership is changing. In step three, this new information is evaluated at the manufacturer's node to evaluate customer eligibility. Perhaps also pricing updates could originate from the manufacturer node as well. And as these updates are being done and manufacturers are evaluating eligibility of new customers, they will communicate that information both back to the GPO, this is information they don't have today, as well as to the distributor real time. As well, in that blue hashed line, they're posting a proof to the blockchain of the latest state of the contract. Who is eligible, what is the pricing, what are the products, so that there is a obfuscated proof that sits on the blockchain. It doesn't reveal data to anyone not involved in the transaction, but it's available for the next step when the distributor is going to sell the product and invoice and be looking for that chargeback back. So as stated in this step, the distributor is now going to sell medicine to a hospital, and they're going to be checking against the blockchain. They're actually going to post a transaction that will check, is this the right eligibility? Is this the accurate pricing? If all those business rules are met, the blockchain will accept the transaction and will send the chargeback back to the manufacturer. This control ensures that the manufacturer is not getting any chargebacks that are not accurate. It's again stopping at the distributor's door and checking that all the rules are met so that the manufacturer can be assured that the updated state of the contract that they posted is being honored in the chargebacks that they're being sent by the distributor. So these are all the steps together of the chargeback solution and the varying roles that both the blockchain layer as well as the private peer-to-peer messaging layer in the network uses in order to ensure that privacy of the companies are met, but at the same time that the benefits of being together in a network are realized. And we're going to talk through some of those today in the specific examples of customer and contract management eligibility. So I want to start with the first, which is synchronized industry data. I referenced this in step 1 of the process. But there's a couple things that by having be together in a network with uniform data is really going to benefit everybody. First, as I mentioned, MediLedger has been designed as a permissioned network. And so all participants need to be authorized and able to join. The network is open, so everyone with legitimate business reasons can join the network, but they are identified by who they are and are associated with appropriate identifiers so that everyone knows who they're doing business with. This component alone allows us to set up the structure to enable secure peer-to-peer messaging, because you know who you're doing business with and you know who you're sending messages to and who you're getting messages from. We've also been working to connect to external identifier data, the data and identifiers that are used throughout the industry to identify customers. And we already have integrations in place and underway with HIBIC, HRSA, and DEA, with future identifier connections being installed. And we're certainly happy to hear any additional feedback from manufacturers or others in the industry who use other identifiers to really make sure we have a robust set. And I think when Abhi talks through how we're doing that customer eligibility evaluation, it'll be clear that by putting the right data connected to this network, we can really automate all of the workflows you guys are doing today to evaluate customers. So by having the synchronized data now connected, shared via the blockchain to all the participants in the network, first off, one of the benefits is that all the customer data can be checked for accuracy during additions and updates. Like I mentioned in the example previously, if a GPO is sending updated roster information, we can use the data already in the directories to check if perhaps a HIN number or DEA number was keyed in incorrectly. It can stop and say, this isn't a valid DEA number. Can you please check and fix this? We can also check that these licenses are active so that, again, manufacturers and distributors are not needing to waste time cleaning up data that isn't valid at that moment in time.
Suzanne, we did have a question.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt.
Sorry, I thought it might be worthwhile to bring up now. They're asking about what happens when a customer is not eligible for the contract submitted by the distributor's sale.
If they're not eligible for the contract and the distributor had sold it anyway,
I believe so,
yeah, one of two things can happen. It could be that the manufacturer has not sold to this customer previously. And Abhi's going to explain how we're designing an engine that allows a manufacturer actually to evaluate the entire roster. But in today's world, those rosters are very large and manufacturers are not going to spend the time evaluating the extra tens of thousands of customers who they never expect to do a sale to. But if there is a sale and the manufacturer has chosen not to evaluate the entire roster, what the solution can do is send the manufacturer a notification that this customer has gotten a sale. They're not designated as eligible as per your contract, but would you be willing to evaluate them to see if they are eligible? So Abhi can describe this a little bit more in his section, but the idea is that it almost can put the chargeback in a pending state, and our solution is providing actually really rapid tools to do that evaluation with the fact that all these databases are now integrated. So hopefully that can actually speed up the evaluation to let the distributor know in a short time frame that that customer is eligible. The other thing that having synchronized industry data is going to do is our understanding is that there are changes that take place on a regular basis, changes to the HIBIC database, maybe a hospital's HIN number, perhaps a doctor has moved to another clinic. All these changes today are hitting every company independently. And by having the database connected directly, everyone can be aware of this information all at the same time and act upon the fact that if this is changing eligibility, everyone can be notified virtually in real time. Or as well, if there's other information that's changing, perhaps that's coming from a different source, maybe the distributor's been notified of a change, they can now communicate through the blockchain to perhaps the HIBIC node and say, hey, we've heard this information. Does there need to be an update to the HIN directory? So we're hoping that this can create almost crowdsourcing and everyone operating, again, from a shared source of data, rather than HIBIC being hit by 6 different companies emailing them, asking them for updates. This can all take place through a central communication flow. And Abhi's going to talk later about how this can also automate the eligibility assessments by having this data that companies all independently use to do their eligibility assessment. The fact that they're all working from the same data is going to be really relevant. Today, we've learned that HIBIC can actually have a couple different versions of the directory depending on what source companies are getting it from. DEA has, again, a couple different sources that are slightly different. And those slight differences can end up in being concerns and issues in dispute. By everyone working from the same data, we feel that really improves the opportunity that there won't be any issues or disputes resulting from slightly mismatched data because the directories are different. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Abhi, who's now going to start talking about our customer evaluation engine. Abhi, are you there? Abhi? Well, I'll start.
I'll see if I can ping him. Yeah, go ahead and start. I'll see if I can get a hold of him.
Yeah. So we've built an evaluation engine that is now going to leverage all this great connected industry data to do some of the heavy lifting that all these companies are doing individually on their customer evaluation. Today, they're the inputs from the GPO, and then there's a set of customer due diligence that takes place at each manufacturer. To note, each manufacturer has a unique set of rules that they use in order to determine what customers are eligible for what contracts. There isn't a single industry-wide methodology. And this due diligence that manufacturers do is actually proprietary information, and it's not information that they necessarily want others in the industry to know. But by connecting an automated rules engine to the different databases, we found that a lot of this customer due diligence can literally be automated and enable an output that can set up the appropriate data sets about the customer, its GPO affiliation, its class of trade attributes as determined by the manufacturer, so that it is effectively allowing a manufacturer to do an automated evaluation through the engine and through the connected data sources. I'm going to check here to see if Abhi's able to join.
I'm here now, Suzanne. I needed to be unmuted.
Okay.
I was here all the time.
Okay,
Sorry
thank
about
you.
that.
I'll pass it on to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Suzanne. And hi, everyone. Sorry about that technical glitch. I think Suzanne has already covered here what the customer evaluation is all about. As she was describing, the customer evaluation is a very critical step in the chargebacks process. And it answers the question of, is this customer eligible for a contract or not? And oftentimes the customer evaluation is done either proactively by certain manufacturers in advance of a sale, or in some other cases is done reactively to a sale. And to the earlier question that was asked, the evaluation is done only after the chargeback claim is submitted. In our product and solution development from the beginning, we have strived and worked really hard to go down to the root causes of the chargebacks issues. And in our assessment and evaluation, the customer assessment and customer evaluation is a very critical step in the chargebacks process, which results in a lot of downstream issues. And what we've done is really built the technology and the processes to help every manufacturer get to a place where they can proactively determine the eligibility of all customers and send a very definitive eligibility list to all the wholesalers, so that the wholesalers do not have to interpret the eligibility of a customer anymore based on a roster. They get very precise, quote unquote, instructions from the manufacturer about who to sell to, at what price, and what product, such that when the claim is submitted, it will get properly adjudicated on the spot, and there will be no dispute or misalignment on whether the customer was eligible or not. Suzanne highlighted some of the questions you ask yourselves, the manufacturers ask themselves when they are looking at a customer. And one of the key aspects is at the bottom, the operators who are evaluating the customers have to oftentimes go and fetch the information from the source websites, and that takes up a lot of time. It takes anywhere between 5 to 30 minutes to evaluate a single customer for eligibility. And because it takes so much time, it is near impossible for any single manufacturer to evaluate all the customers for eligibility. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of customers, and that is practically impossible because of the manual ways in which the customer evaluation is done today. Similar to, so this slide shows you how the GPO input is evaluated. If we go to the next slide, we can see in addition to the GPO input, there's often changes happening in the respective identifier databases. So changes happening in HIBIC, changes happening in DA or the 340B database, which really impact the chargebacks eligibility and the process and result in chargebacks disputes as well. But these changes happening in the identifier databases are not captured in the chargebacks process today. So here you can see when the input to you as a manufacturer or a wholesaler is any changes that are happening in the identifier database. So it could be an existing customer who has a HIN, went ahead and changed their location, and as a result changed the HIN number as well. Or a customer who's a 340B customer is no longer an active 340B customer and hence does not have 340B status anymore. When these changes are happening in those databases and when these changes come to you, you are really asking yourself the question, should I deactivate this customer from my customer master? Should I deactivate this customer from a contract? Should I be changing the class of trade of this customer because this customer has now changed the nature of its business? Should I be changing the identifier? Should I be changing the address? And all these questions are questions that you are asking yourself and you are processing these. But today that's happening very infrequently. That's happening once in a month, once in a quarter, or maybe once in a year, which results in customer masters, which could be fairly out of date and misaligned with what's happening in the source databases, and more importantly, misaligned with what your trading partners might have. So it could be a situation where the wholesaler has gone ahead and updated their database to reflect the correct identifier of the customer, but the manufacturer has not received this information yet from any source and still has the old HIN number in their database, which results in then naturally chargebacks rejections when the wholesaler is submitting the chargeback claim with the new HIN number and the manufacturer has the old HIN number. So what we've done, if we go to the next slide, we have taken all this and really built an engine that automatically processes every single customer that comes in from a GPO for eligibility, and also processes any changes that happen in the source databases, in the identifier databases, and incorporates those changes in the customer master and hence incorporates those changes in the eligibility itself. So this evaluation engine, some of the key components of the engine are the class of trade engine, which is allowing you as allowing a manufacturer to specify the rules based on which the class of trade of a customer can be determined as per the local rules of a manufacturer. Every manufacturer has their own class of trade system, and there isn't an industry-wide class of trade standard out there, and that results in misalignment as well. And what we've done is built the technology here, and we have a very powerful business rule engine running in the background that allows every manufacturer to customize and write their own rules to determine the class of trade according to their own system. In some cases, the class of trade determination might be fairly simple in that if the DA database has X class of trade, then my class of trade is Y. Or it could be much more complicated and complex in that it isn't just a straight mapping. You are also looking at a combination of the HIN class of trade, the DA class of trade. You're looking at the name itself of the customer, and you're looking for certain keywords like oncology. You are even visiting the website of the customer, and you're trying to look for certain keywords in those websites. And based on all those various inputs, you then synthesize everything and determine a class of trade. And all these rules, be it simple, be it complex, can be incorporated in this class of trade engine, which lies within this broader customer evaluation engine. The GPO affiliation engine is another important engine. It allows you to specify any rules that you might have about GPO affiliation, especially when you are trying to determine if a customer belongs to X GPO or Y GPO, in case both GPOs send you the same customer and you have a custom GPO exclusivity rule. This engine allows you to specify the rules around that based on documentation that is processed by the document processing engine. So in our system, we are also allowing the GPOs to send the various pieces of documents and document information that the various manufacturers want. And those documentation and information is critical to determining the eligibility of the customer. Examples of documents are letter of commitment, own use certificate, and others. And those are critical in the customer evaluation itself. Besides these three, the other pieces that the engine is capable of doing is simply being able to process updates. So the engine is aware of what customers you already have as a manufacturer, and whether when a new customer comes in, should you be creating a new customer record in your customer master, or should you be updating an existing customer record with new information? So the engine is intelligent about that, is aware of the existing customer information, and is able to guide you accordingly. And the last piece here is attribute assignment. Besides the class of trade, GPO affiliation, documents, you might have other attributes that are important to you and that are important to determining finally the eligibility in the contracts themselves. And you might have local rules for these attributes as well. And the attributes might be dependent on, again, either various pieces of documents or information contained in HIBIC, DA, and so forth. And that's incorporated in this engine as well. And this engine allows you to write rules to process these various inputs and assign one or more arbitrary attributes to the customers. So the evaluation engine as a whole allows you to fully process any incoming GPO customer or any changes that have happened in the identifier databases, and then provides an output that results in terms of business outcome, results in a place where you as a manufacturer have the ability to determine the complete eligibility list at all times and give the distributors a definitive eligibility list. And also, if you want, have a clean customer master. That's important for especially compliance reasons. You don't want to be selling, for example, controlled substances to a customer that doesn't have a valid DA number anymore. You don't want to be selling 340B drugs to a customer that is not a 340B eligible customer anymore, eligible covered entity anymore. And this engine allows you to maintain all that in a very fluid, local way and automated way. You can process hundreds of thousands of customers within seconds and minutes, as opposed to the hours and days and weeks, frankly, it takes today.
Bobby, we just have a couple questions from the group. The first one is around privacy. Where does the engine processing this data? Is this all happening in the local server? Is there any concern around privacy for data and business intelligence?
So overall, as I'm sure has been covered in the past, our system is a privacy first system. Anything that we do takes privacy into account, and we work very, very hard to ensure that all private data and all private rules remain private at all times, and there's zero chance of any business intelligence leakage. Specifically here, as far as the customer evaluation engine is concerned and all the rules associated with this engine are concerned do stay in private servers and are processed in a very local manner and are not shared with anyone else in the network.
That's great. And then there's another question around how each individual node updates their own ERP system's master data when there's changes to the customer data.
When there are changes to the customer data in the MediLedger node, the output that you see here is what we are calling a proposal. The MediLedger node, based on its intelligence, based on the various inputs that it is receiving and that it is connected into, is generating various proposals for your existing customers to advise you to create a new record or update an existing record. And then once those proposals have been generated, those proposals can be either manually processed, where an operator goes into your existing legacy system and makes those changes in the legacy system, or they can also be automatically processed through integration connectors that we have already built, or we will be building in the future to ensure that there's a smooth transition from the MediLedger node into the legacy system and into the existing customer masters.
That's great. Thanks so much.
So if we go to the next section, we are now going to talk about customer identity. So far what we've done is we have integrated into the various data sources and we're bringing all that into the network. We have built the customer evaluation engine so that all manufacturers can very proactively determine eligibility of all customers. However, even after you've done all this, there might still be a misalignment as far as customers are concerned between the various trading partners. And the misalignment could be because of the identity of the customer. In our initial discussions with the working group, when we started about a year ago, the identifier issue was one of the first issues that we really started to think very deeply about. We heard many anecdotes about issues that are pertaining to identity misalignments. For example, the fact that different trading partners may use different identifiers for the same customer. Somebody might identify a customer by its HIN number, but another trading partner might identify the same customer with its DA number. And when that's happening, even though you're doing business with the same customer, you're not talking about the same customer because you're identifying the customer differently. Also, we discovered that the identifiers that are being used are truly not meant for the chargebacks process. They have been built for different purposes, they have different characteristics, and they don't necessarily fit very well into the chargebacks process. And also finally, the identifiers that do exist may or may not capture the true identity of the customer. And that's a very fundamental, profound point here that we're going to discuss, that how do you even define a customer? Do you define a customer by its location, by its profession, by its customer type? How do you identify even a customer? So when we came across these problems, if we go to the next slide, some of the initial ideas that we had right in the beginning, I would say in month one, was, can we get the industry to align on one identifier? Since everybody's using different identifiers, maybe if we moved everyone to a single identifier, we would solve the issues. Or if that's not enough, and the fact that these identifiers are not necessarily purpose-built, can we create a new identifier? And as we floated these ideas, we quickly realized, with the help of the working group, that these are not feasible ideas. The industry has been creating new identifiers every 5 to 10 years, and each of those identifiers have their own unique problems. So creating yet another identifier is a no-go. And also getting the industry to align on one single identifier is also not feasible because everybody is using it for different purposes. And in addition to this, what we realized, if we go to the next slide, is to the question of who is a customer and what is a customer. The customer, there is no such thing as everyone is trying to identify a customer either by thinking of a customer as a location, as a physician, as a hospital group, and so forth. But what it really is, a customer for each of you, is a business relationship. A parallel to this is the banking industry, where for a bank, when you go in and open an account just for yourself, that is a business relationship. Even though you are going in as an individual, the identity that is assigned is not to you, but to the business relationship between you and the bank, which is that of an individual checking account. But if you go in with your spouse, And if you open a joint checking account or a joint savings account, that is a completely different business relationship that the bank has with both of you, you and your spouse, and is assigned its own identity. So how we should be really thinking about this, about customers, is not as customers, but as business relationships, and realizing that the business relationships really differ between trading partners depending on what you're trying to do. So as an example in the slide here, for a manufacturer, the business relationship could be, it's a different business relationship with the hospital system. It could be a different business relationship with a specific department within a hospital system, or within or with a specific hospital, or it could be a business relationship with a specific physician within a specific division of a hospital system. So it can be at various levels for a manufacturer. For a group purchasing organization, for a GPO, typically it's more either the hospital system or the sites. That is the relationship that they have with their customers. And for a wholesaler, of course, what is most important to a wholesaler is both the buying entity, but also more importantly, the shipping entity and the shipping relationship, because they need to know, especially as a wholesaler, where should I send my drugs? Where should the truck go and deliver the drugs, so that you have it and you can then pass it on to your patients. So we have really, in our system, really thought a lot about this, and the fact that we are talking about business relationships, and we are talking about, we should be thinking of identifiers in the specific context of the chargebacks process. So what we then did was said, okay, who should be the source of truth for the customer identity as far as the chargebacks process is concerned, and whose business relationship should be taken into account the most. And there was consensus across the board that it should really be the manufacturer, the drug manufacturer, that should be driving the customer identity within the context of the chargebacks process, because at the end of the day, it is the manufacturer that is getting into a contract with the GPO and is then passing on those instructions to the wholesaler, asking the wholesaler to sell the drugs based on the contract. And if the manufacturer is passing on those instructions, it should be the manufacturer also passing on, determining the identity scheme that it wants to follow based on its own local definition of the business relationship, and make sure that it's passing that on to the wholesaler as well, so that the wholesaler can do its job. So as a very extreme example here, if you think about this situation where there is a physician with a DA number BA 8657035. And let's say for a second that this physician happens to live in Wilmington, Delaware, and which is bordering Philadelphia in Pennsylvania and Providence in Maryland. And this physician happens to be practicing in a hospital in Wilmington, a clinic in Philadelphia, and another clinic in Providence. So the same physician may have, with the same DA number, happens to be practicing in three completely different locations, three completely different entities, in different states even, but those different entities happen to use the physician's identifier as their own DA identifier in order to obtain controlled substances. And this is a very extreme example. This may apply to some of you, this may not apply, but this is something that can happen today and does happen today. So now if we think of this situation, and we say for a second that we get into the GPO shoes. The GPO, it so happens, has onboarded the clinic B in Providence, Maryland as its own customer. And that is the customer that it wants to add to its roster. So when it passes it on to the manufacturer, if we go to the next section,
Sorry.
In this situation, it so happens, luckily, that the manufacturer's identity scheme is not just DA. It is DA plus city plus state plus zip code. Those are the four elements that determine the identity for the manufacturer. And because the manufacturer has done this, when the manufacturer receives this customer from the GPO, the manufacturer is able to essentially create a mapping, is able to link that customer to clinic B in its customer master, which is denoted here as M025. And it then places that customer clinic B into the right set of contracts. If this was to be a different identity scheme, and let's say for a second that the identity scheme was simply DA number, which is the case with almost everyone today, all three customer records here hospital A, Clinic B, all three of them would get slotted into the same contract because the manufacturer's system recognizes all three customer records as essentially the same because they all happen to have the same DA number. Although in the real world, those are three completely different entities, and the business relationship that the manufacturer has is completely different for all three of them. So if you go to the next section, and the last one, after the clinic B has been placed into contract number 2 here, which is where clinic number B should be, the manufacturer then passes that on to the wholesaler distributor, and the distributor is then able to also essentially create a linkage, an accurate linkage between contract number 2 and clinic B, which is denoted here as D673, and is able to then sell to the right customer. And when they submit the claim as a result, the claim is approved. And that is what the business intent is. The manufacturer is intending for M025 clinic B to be a part of contract number 2. If this identity scheme were not to be followed, then all three entities here, clinic A, clinic B, and hospital A, would all get placed into contract number 2 and would all get sold drugs according to contract number 2, which doesn't really capture the real world intent of the GPO and the manufacturer in this case. So we have developed a system, our technology and our system allows the manufacturer to really define these identity schemes as per their own local definition of identity and the relationship, and then pass on that identity scheme to both the GPOs and the wholesalers so that all three are completely aligned at all times, such that then when the wholesaler makes a sale, that claim is then it's then adjudicated and approved by the manufacturer without any question. There isn't any confusion about the identity anymore. The technical underpinning of this is, in addition to conveying the identity rules and using the identity rules, we do something called a mapping between the internal customers and existing customers. So if you think here in this box, if you put yourself in the manufacturer's shoes, the external customers are customer records that are coming in from the GPO, and the internal customers are the manufacturer's own internal customer records. Now, from the previous example, when that clinic B came in, the clinic B would get mapped to the right set of internal customers according to the identity scheme that the manufacturer has provided. And what that does is it creates a linkage between the internal IDs of the manufacturer and the GPO. So you're no longer just dependent on the HIN identity or the DA identity. You're using the HIN and DA number as a vehicle to create a direct linkage between the internal identifiers of your respective customer masters. And by doing that, you reduce a tremendous amount of downstream confusion, because when downstream changes are happening in the respective customer masters, the system can be much more intelligent about what kinds of changes are happening and should it react to those changes or not. And we saw earlier with the customer evaluation engine that the system is in a position to really be intelligent about those changes in the customer master, as well as changes in the source databases. The rules, of course, in terms of benefits, as we already talked about, they are customizable, and each manufacturer can define their own rules. These mappings are happening real time, not in a batch manner. And the system is handling all the mappings in the background. There's, once you've defined the rules as a manufacturer or as a wholesaler, no one has to go back to those rules anymore unless there's a fundamental business change and a fundamental change in the definition of business relationship by the trading partners. So the mapping technology here and the identity rules provided by the manufacturer allow us again to get to a place where at all times there is complete alignment between the wholesaler, the manufacturer, and the GPO about who the customer is. And then with the help of the customer evaluation engine, all of you are also aligned on which contracts is the customer eligible for. So both those critical questions are answered. And as a result of which, when the chargeback claims are submitted by the wholesaler, the chances that the claim will be disputed, will be rejected, is extremely low. As long as the wholesaler has followed all the instructions as provided by the manufacturer, the claim will not be rejected. And that is what we are trying to arrive at with this system, this this state where everyone is aligned, everyone knows what the rules of the game are, and everyone can play according to the rules. And then there are no disputes, no errors, no manual effort.
Abhi, we have a question from the group. Can you talk a little bit about the linkage to wholesaler source program membership lists, as well as on the GPO side?
In the wholesaler source program, for those programs, we are treating the wholesaler essentially as a GPO, and it is the same exact mechanism and the flow that we have talked about so far that apply even in those situations. And in that particular case, of course, the GPO, there might be a third-party GPO that may or may not play a role in that situation. But if it does, so for example, if the wholesaler has a source program, but that source program really depends on the roster of a third-party GPO, then that will follow the same flow, and the data that is shared back and forth between the different trading partners will be described in the data sharing engine that we have already talked about, or we can talk about in more detail in another webinar. But the point is the wholesaler source program, where either the roster is driven by the wholesaler themselves or the roster is driven by a third-party GPO, are both accounted for in the system design as well.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks. There was a couple other questions. One I think we can bring up here. Is there a unique identifier in terms of products that's involved in the MediLedger?
So the system is capable of supporting, again, arbitrary identifiers and arbitrary product identifiers even. As of now, we have really focused on the NDC number, because the NDC number is what is used in the pharma chargebacks process for the drugs. But the system is very easily capable of supporting more. It can support the GS1 identifiers, so GLN for locations, or the G10 and SG10 numbers for the drugs. That can be incorporated very, very quickly. So it's capable of supporting even more. Also, in addition to that, if in certain cases, for example, in medical surgical chargebacks, we know that it's an issue where the products themselves don't necessarily have an identifier. We can use the same identity scheme capability that we have for the customers for the products as well, where the product's identifier becomes more a combination of different attributes. It could be the name of the product, the type of the product, and so forth. And using other attributes besides identifiers, you can construct an identity scheme and apply that identity scheme to the entire process.
Great. And do we get into serial numbers on the actual packages sold to customers, and how does that factor into chargebacks at this phase?
I'll defer to Suzanne on that. She's been doing a lot of thinking about serialized chargebacks. So Suzanne, I'll defer to you on that, and that's a nice segue into the next section of the webinar.
It sure is. Let me just tell you guys real quick where we're going to go from here. I know we only have about 10 minutes left, but please keep sending questions to Mike, and he'll pass them on. Just wanted to say that we're really excited about what this future state for contracts and chargebacks can look like. For those of you involved on a day-to-day basis, the idea of really being aligned on this customer identity, this ability to automate a customer evaluation, all the rules being enforced along the way. It really is a exciting future state of just a really improved customer experience, which I think is what everyone in the process wants, with the reduction of ad bills and rebills, the elimination of errors, reduction in overhead for everyone, and really ensuring that the right price is offered every single time. But this solution, to jump to the serialized chargeback question, is really part of a broader roadmap. MediLedger work started actually in product verification against those serial numbers as part of the Drug Supply Chain Security Act. That solution is already live and is enabling the verification required for saleable returns, and is the foundation for what that law describes as the track and trace solution for 2023. At that point in time, drugs will be moving through the supply chain at a serialized unit level. So the work we're doing on the contract and chargeback work is at an invoice level today because that's how drugs are sold. But we believe this sets us up really beautifully to drive to a serialized chargeback process if the industry wants it, so that the actual financial transactions associated with every unit of medicine sold can be tracked throughout its life cycle in the process. These are only a couple of the exciting opportunities. Abhi had referred to medical surgical chargebacks. We're hoping that work can kick off later this year, building upon the engines that we've built already. There's exciting use cases in the related processes, the admin fees and rebates, government contracts, credit transactions, and then we could even look ahead to commercial rebates and a whole variety of EDI messages that companies exchange today. We can switch from just a data exchange to rule-enforced transactions and rule-enforced data exchanges to really make all the data that's exchanged between companies seamless and a lot smarter. So that was the end of the content we had. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. We'd be happy to take any additional questions on the discussions we've had today.
Great, thanks, Suzanne. One additional question was around how the MediLedger network would interact with other blockchain networks. If somebody joined who's uses a different permission blockchain, how do they interact or even exchange proofs?
Yeah, so I think that's exciting work that I would say technically is still evolving in the industry. Our chargeback solution is built on a technology called Substrate. Substrate is the foundational technology in Polkadot, which is exactly trying to address blockchain interoperability. So it's one that we will be working to explore for compliance to the Drug Supply Chain Security Act. But we've already sort of built with the technology in mind, the capability for it to get there in the future. So I would say still being explored because the technology itself hasn't figured it out. But as we find real use cases, it's going to be exciting to see how we can make that possible. And maybe as a side note, in the product verification solution, which required interoperability with other verification router service solutions, we've already built the interoperability between those solutions and the MediLedger solution. So whether it's another blockchain or whether it's another centralized solution, it's all possible. It'll just take, I would say, both industry and solution provider support to make it happen.
Great, great. The next question was around the sort of central or root causes of chargeback disputes today. And I think maybe it would just be helpful to quickly summarize some of the root causes we're trying to solve for that lead to a lot of the disputes and errors that occur in chargebacks today.
Abhi, you want to take that one?
I can take that. The root causes are, of course, there are many root causes, but I would, if we were to bucket those root causes and do a Pareto analysis, the majority of the chargeback disputes occur due to misalignment in customer eligibility. And that's why we've, which has been the topic today, we've spent a lot of time in addressing that particular issue, making sure that before a sale happens, everyone is clear on which customer is eligible for which contract. Now, within that larger bucket, of course, the customer misalignments happen because there is a class of trade misalignment where a GPO identifies a customer with X class of trade, but the manufacturer happens to disagree and according to its own local classification says it's not X but Y, and that results in chargeback rejections. It can be because of, as we have discussed already, identifier misalignments where the chargeback comes in with a HIN number, but the manufacturer identifies the same customer with a DA number. It can be because outdated understanding of the customer itself. For example, 340B eligibility can be out of date, where the manufacturer has the latest 340B eligibility, but the wholesaler happens to have submitted it without the latest information. So the customer eligibility bucket is one of the key root causes. In addition to customer eligibility, though, there can be misalignments in the pricing itself, where the manufacturer has conveyed that the price of a product should be X, but the wholesaler for some reason happens to sell it at Y. It can be just a date misalignment where a manufacturer have submitted the price updates today, and the wholesaler, it takes the wholesaler, let's say 2 or 3 days to update their systems with the new pricing, and within those 2 or 3 days, issues have occurred in the system, sales have occurred, and chargeback claims have been sent across, which naturally then get rejected by the manufacturer because it doesn't comply with the latest pricing updates. In addition to that, there are lots of, frankly, really edge cases as well. Product divestiture is one of them, where a manufacturer might have sold a product to another manufacturer, but the notification of that sale did not get conveyed to the wholesaler in a proper way, and the wholesaler for weeks and sometimes months continues to send the chargebacks for the old product to the old manufacturer, not the new manufacturer, and that naturally results in chargeback rejections as well. So there are a number of reasons. With the customer eligibility issue being resolved, we believe that we are addressing a large portion of the errors, and the system is already designed to address a lot of the edge cases that I just described as well, all the way to even handling product divestitures and allowing a graceful transition for the entire network from the old manufacturer to the new manufacturer when a drug is divested.
Yeah, and maybe I can just add to that. I think just the construct of having the parties involved connected in a real-time network, to have the data sources they're using connected as well. I'm excited actually as we go live and learn, we can continue to add additional data identifiers if necessary. And I think we're going to discover other things that frankly all seem quite solvable with everyone connected in the same network.
Perfect. I think that was actually the last question, and we're about at time, so it worked out well.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. Just want to highlight, we'll continue with our webinar series later in June, where we're going to talk about the GPO perspective and ways we believe the MediLedger network is going to help guarantee the correct drug pricing for all your members. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.